Today, we're going to be talking about a really important component of a lot of the presentation you give, which is your visual aids. So, throughout the entire time you've seen me make these videos, I've been using slides to help me communicate effectively and to get information to you, as well as just make it more interesting to look at. So, get this to advance. Number one thing I want to say is a bad slide detracts from your presentation. So anyone looking at this would say this is a terrible slide, right? Just random color, a random image that means nothing. So this is pretty obvious to a lot of people that this is not a great visual aid. However, there are lots of ways that we can have bad visual aids. So for this one, at first glance, you think, well, there's no weird colors. There's a nice image over here of a tornado. But you look at all of this text here, right? And so this is just copied and pasted from the emergency procedures. If I'm talking about those emergency procedures, and even possibly right now while I'm talking, you're reading this, you're not paying attention to me. This doesn't help me learn any faster. This doesn't explain anything to me. Okay. So this is when sometimes just because it looks nice and neat does not mean that it's a good visual aid. So what makes it for a good visual aid? The purpose of a visual aid primarily, number one, is to increase understanding. So as I'm talking, oftentimes it is helpful to have an image of what I'm talking about, right? And this also helps use different parts of the brain. If you remember back to narratives, and we talked about why stories were effective because all these different parts of the brain were activated. So as I'm talking, if you're also looking, more of your brain. And it helps us understand. So here's a very basic, simple diagram that I could use if I was talking about how touchscreen technology on something like a cell phone works, right? And so we see a film, dot, electrode, glass. Very, very basic, very simple. A few things are labeled, and I could use that to help my audience visualize and understand what's happening. A good visual aid illustrates an idea. So sometimes we can use as many words as we want, and it's just not going to click. So, for example, here, if I'm talking about the color wheel and shades and gradients, my audience in their mind might be able to sort of see this, but all of a sudden I just have this very basic, right? And so they can see, okay, this is how they line up, and here's how they blend, and here's how it gets lighter to darker. Okay, so it illustrates an idea. Another thing a visual aid can do is it can be very powerful, particularly if you're in persuasion. And a lot of times, if you're using appeals to emotion, but even if you're using logical appeals, and you can illustrate that. So here is a photo image taken from a protest following the death of George Floyd in the summer of 2020. And here you see someone standing, posters say their names and a list of names. And this is a really powerful image that, again, will complement what you are saying in your presentation. Okay, other things. A good visual aid has limited text. So we tend to want to write a lot. We want to hit highlights. Part of that is you often have sat through lectures where lecture slides have a lot of text. And oftentimes that text is there to aid you in note taking. But the reality is all of that text, if you go back to the beginning, it distracts your audience, or you're so busy writing that down, you're not really listening. And I would argue that if you can simply write out what you're saying and hand it to me, that's actually a more efficient way for me to learn. But if you're going to talk and add extra information and make it interesting, I would rather listen to you. And so here, this is just again, simple part chart, productivity for various office occurrences. So your boss is next to you, productivity increases. Deadline approaching, increases. Friday, decreases. Free pizza, non-existent. So it's okay to have some text. And in the case of a chart, having labels is really important. You still want to talk about your visual aid and what's going on, but here is enough that my audience can understand and interpret the chart. And then a good visual aid should serve a purpose. It should not be there just to be there. So you should never have a visual aid or a slide in your presentation that you don't refer to or talk about. Because then what happens is your audience, again, is distracted. So right now I'm talking, and most of you are probably thinking, okay, what's this about? What is this image? So this would be a slide that I might use if I'm talking about persuasive argumentation and the three kind of pillars from Aristotle: ethos, pathos, logos. And this is an image, very simple, but this can help because of these simple visual cues, someone to understand. Okay, so if we think of ethos and credibility, think of a trophy. So I'm, you know, a solid winner type person. Pathos, emotion. Here's our heart. Logos is our brain. So sometimes people ask me, well, how many slides should I have? And, this and that. There's not a set number. You want to make sure that every visual aid you have, there's a reason it's there, that it's going to help your audience. It's going to help you tell your message. You want to make sure that it's interesting to look at, really focus on the visual. Visual aids are visual. So as much as possible, focus on the images. So you'll see here, I have a slide title, and your book talks about the assertion evidence model. So I have made the assertion that a good visual aid can be powerful, and then I support that with one powerful image. If I had 6 small images here, it would lose impact because, again, I'm trying to look at all of these things and process that. So, and another thing I want to say is that as technology has improved, particularly making slides, and there's Google Slides and PowerPoint, and now there's so much help out there to help you with layout and to make things interesting and look good, that even if you're not a professional designer, you're not a graphic designer, you have the ability to create nice, clean, attractive slides. And so remember, keep it simple, keep it clear, and keep it useful.